Okay. First and foremost, I want to start off by thanking you for being here. And I say that not because this is sort of a regular state of affairs. It is quite rare for us to have extensive programming on Palestine at SFU. So it means a lot that you took the time out of your schedule to be here. So my name is Adil Iskander, and I am the interim director of the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies. And this is probably the last time that I'm going to say that because I've got about a month in my time in that office. And so it comes with tremendous pleasure that the closing event of my time in that position is one that focuses on Palestine. What I do want to say is that the program over the last 2 days, and today being the third day, is really quite remarkable because as far as I know, this is the most extensive amount of programming on Palestine in memory at SFU, and we've tried our best to reach as many different communities as we possibly could. The programming started in Surrey. We tried to be in all 3 of SFU's campuses, but SFU Surrey were not as accommodating, so we reached over to our partner institution at KPU and had an amazing lecture over there. I'll tell you more about it momentarily. But Palestine Days at SFU is hopefully the consecration of a recurring event that we hope will happen from year to year, and that we can expand this programming in such a way to include more voices, more stories, more narratives, more films, more spokespersons, and definitely more Palestinians. I want you to know that the program itself, one of the foregrounding aspects of it is centering Palestinian voices specifically, and I'll tell you more about that momentarily. But before we do that, I want you to know that we are on, as you know, but just as a reminder, we are on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. I say this as an uninvited guest and a settler on this land. It is in no small measure a testament to the importance of not only recognizing where this land is, who it belongs to, and how we are part and parcel of the continued settler colonial project that eviscerates the land and uproots the people and essentially buries their memory. We've been reminded of that time and time again. And it is also critically important to do that as we talk about Palestine. The relationships between Palestine and Palestinians and indigenous communities here are not just hypothetical, they're not just conceptual, they're not theoretical, they are lived experiences of uprooting, displacement, exile, and amnesia, collective amnesia. And so with that being said, I would like to, and it is my personal honor to invite Elder Margaret, who is with us here today. Elder Margaret has been with us for the last 3 days, and we've shuttled her across the Lower Mainland to do the welcome for us at Palestine Days at SFU. So I thank you for that, for taking both the time and the energy, and thank you, Norman, for being a loyal and tolerant companion throughout this journey. But in saying that to Elder Margaret and Norman, they mentioned to me that apparently under Andrew Petter, they had an even busier schedule. There was like 5 engagements a day or something like that, not just, so I feel less bad, but at the same time, I don't know if I can arrange programming enough to produce an Andrew Petter type schedule. That said, it's a real honor to have you. Elder Margaret George was born in Squamish First Nation and was raised in Ruby Creek by her grandparents. She attended school on her reserve and graduated from UBC. She has been involved in a variety of events and activities within the Tsleil-Waututh community where she lives, and is very active in the broader Vancouver community as well. Margaret is one of the elders in SFU's Elders Program, where she enjoys working with SFU Indigenous students and the broader SFU community. Thank you so much for being here, and looking forward to hearing from you.
Good evening, everyone. The third day with you. Seems like I'm going to be hanging around with you for another short while. Being carted around the other day, I was wondering where we were going because I've never been to Quatland before. Across town, across here, and I'm looking at all the houses and wondering, am I going the right way or am I being kidnapped? So we mentioned the different Native communities, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. If you're not aware of where these lands are, Musqueam is out towards UBC, and Squamish is from the second nearest up the Squamish Valley, and we are the second nearest out towards Deep Cove. I'm not sure exactly how many members we have, but we are overflowing on our reserve, lack of housing, more little kids running around. I don't even know them now that I haven't seen them for going on 3 years. We've been isolated. So it's kind of good that we're able to see people again. It's really good that I'm going out to different meeting different people, being with SFU. I've been with SFU now going on 22 years. I know that because I went there when my youngest grandson was born, and he's going to be 22 in August. Same age as me. We chuckle because we're going to be celebrating a big birthday this year for me. We may never come out of the cake thing, but I'll tell you a story. One year we decided to have a birthday. My son Norman, we call him Bear, myself and my youngest grandson, we all have our birthdays in August. So one year, I think we had, believe it or not, 8 to 10 cakes for our birthdays. So we were caked out. But we still continued celebrating all through August. We went to the P&E and back to school, and I think somebody has a birthday just as school starts, so that we just continued again. I think the only person that was really happy to see the family was the dentist and the cavities, and that was the little kids, not us. So thank you for inviting me to spend time with you. I'll say a prayer and we can continue this event. Great Spirit, thank you for bringing us together. Just guide each and every one of us on the path that we are on, taking care of our families, especially the old people in our homes, in our communities, and the young children. I ask, Great Spirit, just to remind us that we are the leaders and the mentors of those who follow us, those who witness what we do and what we say. I ask, Great Spirit, just a very special blessing on each and every one present today for all the work that you do, all my relations, and thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Elder Margaret, for your kind words. And it's good to see that when I get to 22, that I can look forward to perhaps jumping out of a cake too. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Palestine Days at SFU, and then we will jump into the program right away. Okay, so Palestine Days at SFU, what is it? How did it come about? Basically, our objective was to come together with an expansive community and student-led program that is centered around storytelling, representation, activism, and solidarity through the acknowledgement of settler colonialism, erasure, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and systemic violence and institutional censure against Palestinians. At the behest and the suggestion of CCMS's program assistant, someone who's also going to be leaving CCMS at the end of next month, Amal Abdullah, who I think is the person still at the door, but I wanted to acknowledge her. And when she's back here, we'll give her a shout out. She was the person who decided that, you know, why not go big? What's the purpose behind having these sort of small insular events that are sporadic and very reactive depending on circumstances? Why not do something that is a little bit more substantial? So we reached out to those centers of progressive thought on Palestine across the university and beyond, and here we are today. Thanks to the generous support and solidarity of SFSS, SFU's Students for Justice in Palestine, the MENA Film Festival, and the Toronto Palestine Film Festival, we were able to build the program over these 3 days. I also cannot but thank the generous support offered by both the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies. By that, I don't mean myself, but really I mean the endowment made possible by those who generously support this kind of programming, as well as the School of International Studies, which under the guidance of Dr. Tamer Mustafa was very generous and very upfront with that support, as well as the enthusiastic and generous support of the Institute for the Humanities, the Independent Jewish Voices Vancouver chapter, and the West Coast Coalition Against Racism, and a plethora of other organizations that expressed support and solidarity, even though they may not have been in a position to provide a contribution per se. At a time when we're speaking about Palestine, when speaking about Palestine alone is anathema, we're grateful that that all of these different programs enthusiastically endorsed the program over the past 3 days. For those of you who were there for the program on Wednesday and yesterday, you will note that we undertook the ambitious goal of having events at all 3 of the campuses, as I mentioned. The first event was a provocative lecture, I should say, given by Bassam Abu Nadi, an educator and an organic historian of Ottoman and Mandate Palestine, who explores that era's notables and persons of privilege to shed light on their predicament and outcomes, and what that means for leadership among Palestinians moving forward. Yesterday, we had a very unique event organized and put together by SFSS, SJP, and the caucus. And it was held as a celebration of their landmark success in passing unanimous resolutions in the Student Council recognizing the colonization of Palestine, committing to BDS, and offering policy guidance moving forward on all Palestine-related matters. And this should not be taken lightly. We should all know. Thank you. Yes. These types of actions are very, very difficult to see through. So for them to happen with unanimous support is both remarkable and in some instances unprecedented. And we can see how difficult they are elsewhere. So thank you to everybody who was involved in making those resolutions possible. It also featured remarks from award-winning Palestinian American journalist and media personality Ahmed Shihab ad-Din, and screenings of 3 terrific films, short films by remarkable Palestinian filmmakers, made possible by the generosity of the Toronto Palestine Film Festival and our friends at the MENA Film Festival. On both days, the food provided was courtesy of the legendary and iconic Tamam Fine Palestinian Cuisine. Yeah, Tamam. She's here. Is that no? Oh my God! And the light. How are you? The representative. Yeah. Holla. Okay. I lost my job. I'm just so excited to see them. I haven't seen them in so long. So the legendary Palestinian restaurant, which has been a center of so much dynamism around Palestine here in the city, but also providing absolutely exquisite food. I can tell you, having eaten it the last couple of days and taken leftovers, it's a testament not only to the remarkable taste, but the incredible generosity of spirit and quantity. The generosity that is really a testament to Palestinians. When you go to Palestine, you witness this kind of hospitality, this kind of warmth where people embrace you. They take you in as one of their own. I've had the incredible pleasure of traveling to Palestine on 3 different occasions. And I honestly, as Edward Said once said, you know, he was quoted saying, "We're all Palestinians." I never felt more Palestinian than when I was in Palestine. And I'm so glad that we have that Palestinian place of refuge here in the form of Tamam. So please visit that restaurant, support it. It's a remarkable place. You get the feel for it. Every little detail matters. As soon as you walk through the door, I'm sorry, I'm like going off on my little, when you walk into the restaurants, both of their spaces, you will feel like you're transported. You're transported into an expression of Palestinian stories. Today's event is about Palestinian stories. Tamam is a Palestinian story. It is a story of people. It is a story of exile. It's a story of perseverance. It's a story of tolerance across racial divides. And it is also a story of what it means to be raising children in this place and how to bring them up to be humanists. You'll see it in the artwork, whether it's the works of both Tamam and the kids and Sobhi, who we'll hear from later today, but also iconic works in the form of Joe Sacco's incredible illustrations. So I strongly encourage you to go to Tamam and support. So thank you, Tamam. Thank you, Sobhi. Thank you guys for being there for us. Today's food, which will come later, is actually provided by Taibe. It's a social enterprise supporting Syrian newcomer chefs. And it is noteworthy that with Taibe, which is now one of the caterers here at SFU, the operation itself began and germinated 5 years ago, thanks to the typical Palestinian generosity and hospitality that I just described inside Tamam. It was inside Tamam that, for those of you who know Taibe, it started inside Tamam Palestinian restaurant. They provided a space for it, they allowed it to germinate, and this exactly is the reason why solidarity matters and moves us forward. Thank you again to Tamam for setting an example, And Tamam, as the restaurant, continues to support newcomers and refugees of all walks of life, all backgrounds, all stripes, and it is a place of refuge. If you walk into that place, whether you're going there to dine or just take a stroll around and press and play the piano in their hallway, you'll realize that you belong there, so does everybody else. So thank you. Today's event is entitled Telling the Stories of Palestine. There's a reason why it's called Telling the Stories of Palestine. One is the emphasis on telling. Telling is an act, but it is also a plea to recite, to remember, to retell, to share, and to not be swept away by amnesia, not to be the victim of the victor's history, not to succumb to propaganda and the crushing machine of collective punishment and erasure. So when we say telling, this is an opportunity for us to allow Palestinians to tell their story. Why stories? Well, because the near infinite number of stories that are the kaleidoscope of Palestinian experiences are yet to behold. Because stories are what make us human. Stories are how we understand the world around us, how we live and create culture. Stories are both the location of power and perhaps the only way to dislocate this power. Thirdly, Palestine. Palestine, the place, both physical, territorial, spatial, but also imagined, conjured, remembered, hyper-realized, and dreamt. A Palestine united in its difference, across temporalities, across time zones, living on, not just in maps hanging from pendants and framed on walls, but in the psyches of exiled elderly people in Auckland and in the thobes of onesies of newborn children in San Francisco. And incidentally, I'm referring to two people that I know who fit this characteristic, but hopefully they'll get to watch this and realize I was talking about them. Telling the stories of Palestine is an attempt to complicate and problematize, not simplify and reduce. So today we have a terrific program for you that will feature films, speakers, and reflections on those topics. I want to start off by bringing forward a real friend and an ally of the Center for Comparative Muslim Studies, and someone who has really enriched the Vancouver scene with so much incredible content, creative content produced from the Middle East and North Africa and beyond. For those of you who haven't had a chance to witness or be part of the MENA Film Festival, I would strongly encourage you to do so. It is, in no small measure, a real sort of transformative endeavor, an initiative here in Vancouver that shifts the landscape of representation of the region. Armen Kazemi, I met a few years ago when this project was at its most germinal phase. He's a co-founder and director of MENA Film Festival, and he is really an indefatigable, tireless individual. I don't know where he gets this energy, to be honest with you, behind the MENA Film Festival, and it keeps growing by leaps and bounds every year. And with their alliance with the Toronto Palestine Film Festival, they were able to bring so many really unique and incredible and touching films from Palestine and from Palestinians across the diaspora and exile to viewers here in Vancouver and beyond. So Armen, I would like to invite you to introduce our films today.
Thank you, Adele, and hi everyone. I want you to know, Adele, that your sentiments are more than requited. So thank you so much. I'm not personally Palestinian, but I hope to, through such actions, be deserving of Edward Said's aphorism that you just mentioned. I don't want to take too much of your time because I know you're anxious to get the program going. So I just want to mention that, yeah, the MENA Film Festival is excited to bring this programming in partnership with the Toronto Palestinian Film Festival. Of course, the operant word being Toronto, so they can't be here with us today. But I just wanted to say a couple of quick words that the Toronto Palestinian Film Festival, they started in 2008 on the 60th anniversary of the Nakba. Unfortunately, this year, well, not unfortunately for them, they're celebrating their 15th anniversary, but also the 75th anniversary of the Nakba. And as you know, as the first and second generation children of immigrant parents, I think that it's really our time to begin telling our own stories in our own way and not sort of mediated by overarching arts and culture organizations that tend to generalize and for lack of better words, exoticize that experience. So part of what we try to do at MENA and TPFF reflects that, and also CCMS and other partners. We try to bring this important programming, and is this breaking up? In more and more dated year to year, try to bring this program to light. So I'm super happy to do that here today. Just a quick word about the initiative on behalf of TPFF that brought this here. They do this thing called Film Residency, and the Film Residency is a every year they invite Palestinians from across Canada to take part in a residency program to create new 10 to 20-minute film projects that will be screened at the TPFF Film Festival. This year, the winning films, a handful of the winning films are the ones that you're going to be seeing today. Just a quick shout out to Tara Hakim, Amanda Boulos, and Naji Rizek, who are the TPFF local pals that we are happy to call friends at MENA.
Thank you so much, Armen, for bringing us these films. Each of them a microcosm of the complexity and in some cases the absurdity of exile, of uprootedness, what it means to live in the shatat, far away from home. You can see that there's a common sort of denominator across all of those films, the feeling of estrangement, the feeling of longing, but also a lot of metaphors and analogies around earth and uprootedness, and also the attempt to continue rituals. It's also kind of a struggle over identity, with identity as both a toolkit and in some cases needing to challenge that identity. It's also a testament to the incredible resilience of Palestinians, both as persons and as collectives. Their struggle with both the languages of colonial kind of legacy, the French, the English, but also what it means to imagine and reimagine their own languages vis-a-vis those relationships. We see an incredible relationship to Earth and what Earth means. Earth as, you know, the place where everything originates, where everything germinates, where things grow from, but also where everything returns. And of course, in light of the importance of the right of return for Palestinians, when we talk about return, it doesn't just mean the corporeal return to the earth, but rather the return to the notion of home. The home is a place of belonging, a place that is familiar. Sometimes it comes with tremendous pain. In the first film, Khalil Haddad's, we hear that moment where she looks at the field where all of those really traumatic memories are. And she's like, it's just a freaking field. But it's not just a freaking field. It's never a freaking field. It means a lot more to all the people who are who have experienced life in those spaces. So thank you for bringing those films forth. Thank you to the Toronto Palestine Film Festival and the Residency for making it possible for filmmakers, emergent, aspiring, folks who have a vision, who have a dream, but more importantly, Palestinians who have a story to tell. Those stories are relatable to some, but not to everyone. But nevertheless, they are an important part of what I described earlier as the kaleidoscope of the Palestinian experience. They should not be reduced to a single narrative. They should not be flattened. The contours are what makes the Palestinian experience all the more remarkable. And nevertheless, it is relatable to a lot of people here, whether you're Palestinian or not. Can I get a show of hands for Palestinians who are here with us? Raise your hand if you're Palestinian. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for continuing to exist against all odds and for continuing to tell your stories. I want to implore you to take every opportunity possible. If you're a filmmaker and you want to make films about Palestine, about who you are, if you want to start narrativizing your experience, please consider those opportunities when they exist to take them on. So thank you, Armin. Thank you to MENA Film Festival and the Toronto Palestine Film Festival for making these films possible. They have a lot more films. Please, I think there's still sort of opportunities to watch many of those films that are releasing at various stages through festivals and what have you, but also through MENA Film Festival in this year and the coming years, you'll begin to see a lot more Palestinian production and content, as well as production from across the region. So I suggest and implore you to follow those. Thank you. Shiraz, I'm gonna have to hold you until the very end because we are going to skip the break and go straight to our next speaker. We're gonna get a break, I promise you. After Sherine, we're gonna get a break, but because she's calling in from New York and we're cognizant of the 3-hour time difference, and she's been up since 5 a.m. I want to make sure that she gets to chime in while we can get her. So Sherine should be either, oh no, I told her it's in 5 minutes. Okay, let me see. Okay, well, maybe you can say what you want until I say. Where is this? Can you tell us? Palestinian Museum, USA? Mm-hmm. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. And just as a point of information for a lot of people, there is now also an online Palestine museum, national museum that came into existence, and it's fully bilingual. So I would suggest that you explore it. It has it is still being populated, but it is full of a lot of really remarkable archival material, content, maps from the many sort of uprooted, erased communities, but also villages, over the thousands of villages, Palestinian villages that have been razed or flattened, but a lot of collective memory and oral history in that museum. So I would strongly suggest that you access it. Are we connected? I'm sorry? Okay. Daryl, we're counting on you. Oh, Daryl, I think we're ready. If you can hear me. Oh, there she is. Oh my goodness. Hi, Sherine, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
Yeah. Woohoo. Fabulous. The technology has cooperated. Thank you so much, Sherine, for being here. It's a pleasure. I don't know if you can you see me?
I can see you.
Okay, well, I'm the least photogenic thing here. There's a whole bunch of people here very excited to hear from you.
I'll take your word for it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sherine, for being here. I'm just going to do a super quick introduction of who you are. But the bio exists, but for those who haven't had a chance to read it, I will introduce you really quickly because, I mean, and this doesn't really capture it, but Sherine Tadros is currently the head of New York office of Amnesty International. She is also the UN representative for Amnesty International there. Before joining Amnesty in July 2016, Sherine was the Middle East correspondent for Sky News. Based in Cairo, she led investigations into and reported on wars and conflicts across the Middle East and North Africa region, including in Gaza, Tunisia, and Iraq. Sherine was one of the first foreign correspondents and reporters to report from inside Yemen during the war in 2015. She also set up Sky's first office in Egypt in 2014. An internationally acclaimed journalist, Shirine's recent recognitions include the Royal Television Society International News Coverage Award in 2016, the Peabody Award for coverage of the Arab Spring in 2011, and the International Media Breakaway Award in 2011. Sherine was nominated for an International Emmy and a Monte Carlo Award for her reporting of the 2008-2009 Gaza war, where she was one of only 2 foreign journalists reporting from inside Gaza. And Bayeux Calvados, sorry, it was like 2, it threw me off the fact that there were 2 languages there. War Correspondent of the Year Award in 2015. And honestly, for those of you who have been following reporting from the Middle East over the last 10, 15 years, it should come as no surprise that Sherine has made her reputation in unabashedly truthful, honest, accurate depiction of the collective dehumanization of communities, especially the victimization of Palestinians under both American, this is kind of a Freudian slip, but I think it captures it, the American war machine as manifest through the Israeli Defense Forces. I have both enjoyed and been in incredible despair watching you cover the news over the last while, but also in your capacity now as a human rights advocate. I welcome you, Sherine. Thank you for joining us. We would have loved to have you here in person, but maybe next time. Thank you.
No, thank you for the kind introduction.
Fantastic. Okay, so can we start off by asking you a little bit about covering Palestine? What does it mean to cover Palestine, cover Palestinian stories? You've spent a significant amount of time in Palestine writ large, both, I can't say in peace and war because there's very little peace for Palestinians on a day-to-day basis, but tell us a little bit more about what it's meant to you to bring forth the stories of Palestinians for international audiences.
Sure. So let me start with going back to 2008, when I'm this rookie reporter that had done a little bit of reporting in Lebanon, but apart from that, had spent 26 years living in my parents' house in London, very much isolated and sheltered from the world. And then my boss comes up to me one day in 2008 and tells me, could you please go into the Gaza Strip and just help our colleague Ayman Mohyeddin, who was in there? Could you just help him with some election coverage? It was the US elections. America's about to elect their first Black president. No one cares about the Middle East, Sherine. Like literally no one is going to be watching you. There's no pressure, just going to Gaza. I'm thinking, I mean, how bad can this be, right? So he goes, okay, here's like 20 shekels. Have 1 fish meal on me in Gaza. And you can and you'll be out by tomorrow. And that was in 2008. And what then happened, of course, was that I went in to the Gaza Strip. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas was broken that night. It ended, the tentative peace that there was, and we went to full-scale war by, a few days later. And I ended up being trapped inside of the Gaza Strip for a month and a half while, the most intense bombardment happened and thousands of people were killed. So I'm telling that story only just to say that I was, I was not one of these people who all my life wanted to cover the Palestinian story. I was someone who was interested in the Middle East and was a rookie reporter and found myself inside of the Gaza Strip. But then, what followed was a real eye-opening experience to what it is like to be trapped inside this tiny territory with no place to go. And I remember one of the first things that really occurred to me is, where are the refugees? Like in every war that you cover, part of our storytelling as journalists is to go and speak to the refugees fleeing the war. But in Gaza, there are no refugees because no one's allowed out. No one's allowed, this very basic right, to safety and to life. And from then I started to really notice the language that was used, even in your introduction, the Israeli army is referred to as the Israeli Defense Force, right? And that is the beginning of cultivating a language by the Israeli government that is extremely deliberate to tell you that this is a territory, Israel, that is under threat from every part of its border, and thus everything it is doing to the Palestinians is justified. Meanwhile, in Gaza, what you have is 1.5 to 2 million, essentially, terrorists just trying to kill anyone that they can. Not mentioning, of course, that the majority of Gaza is, children essentially under 18, that have seen nothing but war and blockade for most of their lives. So this sort of dehumanization, becomes very, very stark, and it is a machine. And when I became a correspondent, in Jerusalem, a year later after that, one of the first things that happened after I got my Israeli press card was that this group reached out to me called the Israel Project, and they said, we'd really like to take you on a little trip around the territory to show you what Israel's like. So they take you on this helicopter as a new journalist, and they do this to all new journalists, and they show you Israel, but they manage not to show you at all any of the settlements, right? They fly over those very quickly. You don't look at them. And the point is to show you how slim Israel is and how it's every single part of its border essentially is, covered with, these enemies. And so there begins the indoctrination, and it becomes actually quite difficult for journalists if they're just there and they don't know very much about the conflict and they didn't get the induction that I did, which is like war in Gaza, to really report and to think about every word that you're saying. And so I do think it's a difficult conflict to cover because of that, because of the language that you are fed and the amount of thinking that you need to do and the knowledge you need to have in order to counter that dehumanization.
Thank you, Sherine. And so, I mean, my immediate sort of follow-up question to that, it has more to do with kind of the affect of what it means to not only have witnessed a war of this kind, you inadvertently have described this kind of open-air prison, which Gaza is often described as, but also the feeling of being bombarded while kind of trapped in that space. But then again, also realizing that there's a kind of a psychic separation between what you're witnessing, what everybody else is telling about that story. What does it do? Is it vexing? Is it maddening? Is it frustrating to go out and realize that you've been in this sort of capsule, if you will, this kind of psychic, ideological, kind of propaganda infused world around you, and you're in this capsule trying to relay the truth, but without being able to have these breakthroughs?
Yeah, it's disturbing is what it is. It's an open air prison, but actually in a prison that there's some sort of process while you're in the prison, right? You were arrested, there was some sort of trial of some sort, and then you end up in prison. Whereas in Gaza, your crime is being Gazan. And I don't think that people really can quite grasp what it's like never to be able to leave, to go into Gaza and not be able to ask the question, so what have you been doing? Where have you been? You don't ask that question in the Gaza Strip. They've either been to the north of Gaza or they've been to the south of Gaza. That is their trip. And this is about 45-kilometer stretch that we're talking about from start to finish. So, I mean, it's almost impossible to really explain what it's like. And that is part of the frustration too. To do the story justice is very hard. But I think, transitioning from covering the conflict as a journalist and then working as a human rights advocate at the UN, I think I saw a different way in which that dehumanization works, right? So on the ground, I could tell that it worked so that we don't have any public outrage towards what Israel is doing to the Palestinians. But at the UN, I remember, I was there when, when the US ambassador Nikki Haley was very much championing this new Trump era of moving the embassy and all the rest of it, that rewriting history essentially. And I remember her sitting in the chamber of the Security Council, and I was sitting like 2 rows back. And she adopted this language, right, of defense and aggression and responding. And essentially what it did is create a cover using the words that, the Israeli government fed, but it's no longer just about dehumanizing, it's also about legal cover, right? Cover under international law. And that's, I think, the bit that I didn't quite grasp when I was inside of Gaza, when I was a journalist at least. And then at the UN, I could start to see how it really resonates, the sort of gray area of, well, there were Hamas operatives in the school at the time, that I thought was dehumanizing. But then I realized when I have my role now, that is a cover to say it's not a war crime. So it's actually a lot more serious than just trying to stop the outrage. It's trying to stop the accountability as well.
So now you've you're really transitioning us to a discussion about how to uncover what is being covered, essentially. So you've got, mediated propaganda on one level, and you've got kind of legal frameworks that are designed in such a way to obscure and obfuscate realities as they are, and to move things in a direction so that the dehumanization continues to be perpetuated against Palestinians without any end in sight. Today, in your capacity as someone at the forefront of challenging this, you are actively involved. I know that this is a collective effort, but you can nevertheless still take credit for producing what I think is a really, really remarkable document. It's a report on Israel's apartheid against Palestinians. It's literally called Israel's Apartheid Against Palestinians. And I have this is not even an abridged, this is just the executive summary of a 230-page document, very, very meticulously produced and researched by Amnesty International and all of the scholars, staff members who are involved in it. And it's subtitled Cruel System of Domination and Crime Against Humanity. I remember for many years, the accusation leveled against Amnesty and Human Rights Watch is that they spend so much of their time focusing on the global South, on the third world. It's very, very seldom that we see reports this honest and this direct in their criticism of America's top ally. Tell us a little bit more about this report, what it means, and what do you think the repercussions of having this published might be?
Yeah, I mean, this report was many, 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 many years in the making. So many people were involved, including outside consultants. We were in partnership with many other groups. And let me say that this is Amnesty, in a way, coming late to the party, because this is after Israeli groups, Palestinian groups, Human Rights Watch, another global human rights organization, have all said that there's a system of apartheid that Israel is carrying out against the Palestinians. So Amnesty goes a step further as such, because it says that Israel is carrying out this system of apartheid not just on Palestinian territories, but in Israel proper and against Palestinians in the diaspora as well. So it really documents in great detail and unpacks what this apartheid means. What is this cruel system of domination? How is it intentional? And it's very important because I think, again, going back to my work as a journalist on the ground, we tend to cover this conflict in a very piecemeal way, right? So, now, there's a war in Gaza and everyone gets really upset and we start posting online about this is happening and this is happening. And then something else happens and we move on to another story. And then there's a big settlement, dispute and a Palestinian house is on fire and a child dies and we're all outraged again. And we're saying so we keep doing this, right? And we keep documenting and looking at it from the perspective of, from our perspective, crimes under the occupation, crimes, and the perspective is one, and the framework that we use is one of occupation and war crimes based on that. And it's not working. It's not working to stop the violations. It's not working for accountability. It's not working to end the suffering of the Israelis or the Palestinians. So, what Amnesty's done is essentially said to you, this is the root cause of all the violations. Every time these things happen, whether it's a war in Gaza or whether it's the bombardment of the Temple Mount, Haram al-Sharif, every time one of these things happen, the root cause is the system of apartheid. And until we dismantle the system of apartheid, we will continue to have this violence. We will continue to be outraged and then not outraged and so on. So, we're really making a huge effort right now after the release to normalize the word, to say that this is not a controversial statement. This is a lived experience by the Palestinians. And anyone who's been there can attest to the system of partition, right? And the system of oppression and domination. It's really very, very evident. So how do we in the international community, and from where I sit at the UN, make the word apartheid just, less taboo and more just part of the language that we use in order to try and bring peace and in order to try and tackle the violations. And that was essentially, our line when we continue to lobby with here in Washington and beyond. We try and tell Israel's allies the same, that everyone is coming to the same conclusion. What side of history do you want to be on? Because there were plenty of people who were on the wrong side of history when we were talking about South Africa and then suddenly had to change course. It's going to be the same thing. Even if you're a friend of Israel, right now is the time to have these difficult conversations with the government about its policies.
So what has been the response as far as people coming out and being on the right side of history and accepting speaking truth to power part?
I mean, the immediate response from the Israeli government, in fact, even before we published the report, they got a leaked copy, and it was no conversation over the substance and only a charge of being anti-Semitic. And that was really tough because, I would engage and even say, which part is anti-Semitic? It's 228 pages. Point to me where it's anti-Semitic, and then let's have a discussion. But it wasn't. There was never a back and forth like that. It's anti-Semitic, and that's it. End of conversation. And that was really frustrating because we spent, 7-8 years on writing this. So at least engage with us on the substance. So that's been hard, and that hasn't really changed coming from the Israelis. I think from the US, different responses, honestly, from different parts of the government, some who acknowledged the issue and the problem, but didn't really want to engage further, and some who outright said that this is a ridiculous thing to say, and it's I don't want to even have this meeting. So it has been tough, but I think on the other side we've had a huge amount of public acknowledgement, outrage, understanding. We've had even countries from South Africa and Namibia, Malaysia, who have really sort of adopted this language as well, and have partnered with us in trying to sort of explain to other member states of the UN what's going on. And just the other day, there was a meeting on the killing of the Jazeera journalist Sherine Abu Akleh, and it was a meeting of the UN Security Council. And I just thought it was really quite remarkable to hear the US ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, talk about how it's unacceptable that she was killed in this way, and that there must be some accountability, and Israel must do something here. And it was stronger language than I've seen a US diplomat. She was quite outraged, right? And likewise, the other countries, including Ireland, who, not necessarily the best on the subject, were also like completely outraged, saying this is a red line that's been crossed. What are you going to do about it? To the Israeli ambassador. And so I do think that we are making incremental, slow progress here. It's not that we're not making progress, but there is still a long way to go to a real acknowledgement across the board and internationally that there is a system of apartheid that exists.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that, Sherine. It's both refreshing and as optimistic a note as one could think of. Having said that, you also mentioned Sherine Abu Akleh's killing, and without sort of kind of belaboring this, but this is someone who was a colleague of yours at Al Jazeera, and seeing that you were also on the front lines of covering Israel's conflict and war and oppression of Palestinians. What would you know, I don't even know what I'm asking you. I'm kind of inviting you to kind of reflect on that incredibly difficult task of trying to tell the story from the ground, while the messengers themselves are being victimized by state suppression.
Yeah, and this is a problem. Certainly, it's not new, and it's not just Israel. And I think that really must be acknowledged. I don't think there's been a more dangerous time to be a journalist. I think when I first started as a journalist, it was, there was some sort of protection that I remember sort of saying to people, I'm a journalist, like when they'd come towards you, the police, and so I'm a journalist, like, as if, that provided some cover. And now we're talking about the active targeting of journalists, and there is a war on information, and there is a war on those who give that information. And that is being launched by governments, including the Israeli government. And I think it's the brazenness that is really just scary. The brazenness of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi to Sherine Abu Akleh and all the others that we don't know the name of off the top of our tongue, right? But there are so many. And it's not just those who are killed. What about those who are harassed? Those who are harassed online, the microaggressions, like the visas here in the US, where yes, you visited that country, so you can no longer come here. Like all of these aggressions against journalists that make your life so difficult. And I think for Sherine, it was a double, right? As the Palestinian ambassador said in a meeting, he said, Sherine wasn't just killed for what she did, she was killed for who she was. And I think that was what's so stark about her killing, like as a Palestinian and also as a journalist, and I think that resonated in a way with different areas, different people, different groups of people. And it's why the Security Council was able to have a meeting, right? Because they wouldn't have had a meeting for, a woman who was killed in the West Bank during a raid, a Palestinian woman. But they had a meeting because she was, a well-known, respected journalist. But at the end, the point is that she was also targeted because she's Palestinian. And that's why, and she was also there because of the system of apartheid again, because she was covering an Israeli raid in a West Bank, on Palestinian land. So, I think it all goes back really to the same core issues when we're talking about how we remedy this. And until, as a public and as member states and as an international community, we really, acknowledge what the problem is, the root cause. I really fear for all my colleagues that work, especially in the occupied West Bank and across those territories, because I think it will only get worse. And journalists have died way before Sherine, and they have died since Sherine at the hands of Israeli soldiers.
I can't tell you how incredibly privileged we are to have you with us today, Sherine. Your words are incredibly resonant on so many levels. We're also immensely grateful that while you're not covering the stories per se, that you can at least contribute to the livelihood of your peers, your once colleagues who are doing this reporting, by trying to push for policy change that may, at least in some incremental way, change the circumstances to make their work less life-threatening, less damaging, less traumatic, and in doing so contributing to the livelihood of those who are being victimized by the state of Israel. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for doing what you do. We look forward to having this conversation with you again, maybe in person, in a more protracted way. I think you probably already know this, but Dena Takruri, your once colleague, is also kind of on this Zoom call. So we're going to switch to her. You're welcome to stay, but we're also aware of how late it is on your end, but it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Sherine, for your time and your insights, and looking forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And lucky you guys, you get Dena next. So I'll hand over.
Thank you so much. Okay. Hi, Dena.
Hi, Adil. Hi, Sherine, or bye, Sherine. See her go.
I know it's like a baton that you're passing on. Okay, Dena, I'm going to introduce you really quickly, and then we're going to have a conversation. I know you can only see the top or back of my head, and it's very unusual. I would look over there, but then I wouldn't be able to see. But hi.
Hi.
All right. Okay. So Dena is a senior presenter and producer at AJ Plus, the all-digital video news network from Al Jazeera's Media Network. Wait, that has network twice in it. Somebody needs to edit your bio, Dena. Based in San Francisco, California. She is recognized for her bold and immersive reporting, characterized by speaking truth to power in any setting and giving voice to those unheard. She often asks the tough and taboo questions others shy away from. Many of her videos have gone viral, earning millions of views on Facebook and YouTube. Dena has reported internationally on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, tensions on the Korean Peninsula, and on Europe's refugee crisis, where she was one of the very first journalists to ever broadcast using Facebook Live. Among the domestic stories she's covered, by domestic meaning in the US, are the 2016 presidential election, Flint's water crisis, AIPAC's annual policy conference, the fight against Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock, and ISIS crackdown on undocumented people under Trump. She has extensively covered the Black Lives Matter movement and issues related to Arab and Muslim communities in the US. I'm going to add this. Can I add this part? This was not in your bio. She is the author of an already acclaimed and highly anticipated memoir of young Palestinian activist Ahed Tamimi entitled They Called Me a Lioness, coming out very soon and on pre-order from One World Books. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Thank you.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you for coming, Dena, in a virtual kind of manifestation of who you are. Okay. So
how many people are there, by the way?
It's a full house of 700 people.
Hi Canada. Hi Vancouver. I was just there a month ago. Beautiful city.
Okay, it's beautiful enough for you to come back and visit. Okay, so let's see. Dena, we have a bunch of questions for you. I know I'm cognizant of the time. I know we started late, but you have spent, okay, and I just want to say that when in your bio, there's a lot of accurate things in here, but one of the things that I really enjoyed reading was how you asked the difficult questions. I do remember you like saying something to Donald Trump. I don't know what it was, and he kind of gave you like an evil look or something like that. But you've been in those situations where you kind of like shout down really evil people. So I want to acknowledge that. But the work that you've done throughout your time as a journalist, and you're very young, but nevertheless very accomplished, I just want to say it is a testament to the remarkable commitment of what it means to be a Palestinian and a journalist. Talk to us a little bit more about what sent you into journalism as a profession, as an area. What does it mean for you to be telling stories, and what stories, as far as Palestinians go, are the ones that you want to cover and relay to audiences?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, my desire to become a journalist was very much informed by my identity as a Palestinian. So I was born and raised in San Francisco, first generation. My parents are immigrants from Palestine. They came to the US in like the mid to late 70s. I grew up in San Francisco, but every other summer or so, my mom would schlep my sister and I all the way from San Francisco to the occupied West Bank to spend our summers there. And, you know, I'm a child of the 80s, so I would be there during the first Intifada all the way, you know, through the 90s, under curfew, you know, just witnessing occupation firsthand as a child and just being so, you know, shocked by it. I think witnessing injustice firsthand like that and trying to reconcile, well, how is it that when I'm here with my family, you know, we live under this like military occupation, but as a child in San Francisco, I'm an American with all the rights and privileges, and I can play and watch Nickelodeon and go to the mall and whatever. I think I felt almost some guilt for being able to escape, whereas my cousins and my family couldn't. I also grew up in a household where my dad had the news on like 24/7, because like many Palestinians, he thought our existence in the United States in the diaspora was supposed to be temporary, and that once there was peace or a resolution, we'd go back home to Palestine, right? Like that was always the end goal for so many Palestinians that continue to live in the diaspora today. That never happened, but you know, when you have the news on and that's like your main entertainment as a child, it influences as you. And you know me, Adil, you were my professor in grad school. I'm a naturally very curious person. But there's not that big of an age difference between us, but yeah, I was your student. I'm a very curious person. Social justice is a very deep value of mine, mainly informed by my experiences as a Palestinian, but then let me see from a young age as a student, as an activist, the interconnectedness and the intersectionality with other struggles. So I think that's kind of a long answer to your question as to why I became a journalist. And then, fortunately at AJ Plus, obviously at being a channel of Al Jazeera Palestine is a very important issue that we cover. I've had the opportunity to not only do in studio, like explainers giving context to Palestine, to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, explaining what is an illegal Israeli settlement and why is it illegal under international law? What is the apartheid wall? What is occupation? We were able to do these things, and I was able to have the reference point of being an American who knows how misreported and mischaracterized and how there's such a lack of context when Palestine is reported in the United States. And I felt like it's been my mission in this life to fill those voids and to inform people with the unique sort of disposition that I have of being an American and being a Palestinian who has intimately experienced life under occupation.
I really enjoyed your answer on so many levels, but one of the things that really struck me was and now as a parent myself, I'm imagining what it means to take your kids and travel halfway across the world to a place that is under occupation, with curfew, with intifada, with Israeli kind of oppression. I worry about my kids crossing the street. So it really speaks to how incredibly entrenched this commitment to return is for Palestinians, and the fact that you had this sort of psychic presence of Palestine that permeated every aspect of your family life has transpired into this really kind of remarkable professional journey. So my question here is, how do you traverse this kind of very, very, very personal experience of being exiled and dislocated with all the so-called principles within journalism around I'm not suggesting that you need to kind of defend this, but all these things about like impartiality and lack of and avoiding bias and objectivity, all these things, do they not matter? And in what instances are they sometimes a way to reaffirm the complicity of the lie that is, Israeli occupation of Palestine?
Yeah, I think objectivity as a principle in journalism is a farce. I don't think anybody is truly objective. I think first and foremost, as a journalist, the number one thing that I and everyone has to do is to be 100% factual, right? So I can be factual while also being a Palestinian. I made a decision early on in my career that I'm not going to suppress or downplay my identity. I think that my lived experience, my intimate understanding of the Palestinian struggle is an asset, right? And it allows me to report on it in a way that somebody who maybe parachutes in and doesn't have that context isn't able to do. So, am I biased? Everyone is biased in their own ways. Do we ask these same questions of a Mexican-American reporter reporting on immigration at the US-Mexico border? Are they held to this same level of scrutiny? Probably not. But I would say that, I think identity, especially now in journalism, is an asset. I'm able to report the way I do because I speak fluent Arabic. I'm able to sit across from Ahed Tamimi the day after she gets out of prison and have her look at me and see another young-ish Palestinian woman and be able to be vulnerable and open up about her story, and then repackage or translate that and give that interview to an American audience. So I feel like the ability to straddle both worlds hasn't been a hindrance. It's been an asset, to say that again.
You're absolutely right. I can't agree with you more. And you just reminded me of how, Wolf Blitzer, who is often treated as like the gold standard of objective reporting on mainstream media like CNN, was once the communication director of AIPAC.
Yeah.
So he brought all of that sort of personal baggage into his reporting of the Palestinian, oppression. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I want to kind of zoom in on the story of Ahad a little bit. Some people here might know who she is, others may not. Do you mind? And this is one of those moments where you kind of, you often do these really great explainers where it's global, it's broad, it kind of gives context, history, situates people in that dynamic where Palestinians are, their lives are fraught with sort of Israeli oppression. And then with this particular book, you're kind of zooming in on the story of a single Palestinian, her family, and all those concentric circles of familiarity. Tell us a little bit more about what it means to have told the story versus those explainers, how those two kind of complement each other.
Yeah, I mean, so at AJ Plus, we do the explainers, but I also do field reporting. And so that was sort of my entry point into Ahad's stories. I happened to be in Palestine in the summer of 2018. I went just for a vacation. I went with my mom. I was spending the summer there, having a blast. And then friends of mine who were connected to her campaign, Ahad Tamimi, for those who don't know, she's now about 21 years old, but she was a Palestinian teenager who in December 2017 slapped a fully armed Israeli soldier who was standing in front of her house in the occupied West Bank village of Nebi Saleh, a village that was known for a lot of nonviolent resistance. She slapped him because just about 30 minutes earlier, she had heard that a member of the same unit had shot her cousin at close range in the head and that he was expected to die. Miraculously, he lived. So Ahad slaps a soldier. A video goes viral of it. Israeli society demonizes her. They want revenge for insulting the central symbol of their occupation. She ends up getting arrested. They wanted to make an example out of her, and she served 8 months in prison. So I was in Palestine at the time. People who were working on her campaign said, hey, why don't you stay? They were familiar with my reporting. Why don't you stay and interview her when she gets out? I was like, okay, if you guys will give me an interview, let me pitch it to my bosses. They ended up saying yes, and we got the first interview. So in the lead up to her release, I had spent a few days in her village of Nebi Saleh, getting her backstory, telling the story of how this village, this very tiny, small village for the past decade had waged an unarmed resistance movement against Israel and against the illegal Israeli settlement right across the street from them that continues to confiscate their land and confiscated their natural water spring. I got to know the story of this village and so much violence that they face daily at the hands of the occupation, which is the story for so many Palestinians because the occupation is inherently violent. So we put out this documentary that showed, how she grew up. She grew up seeing her uncle killed in front of her, her mother shot, her father jailed, her shot, whatever. And I just remember being blown away. I mean, I've interviewed so many people, in my career. I've been very fortunate to sit across from, I was like, this is a once in a generation voice. Like this woman, this young girl is powerful and she's like a force to be reckoned with. And so from there, sort of a book deal, the idea of a book came about. It was suggested to me, I pursued it and it happened. And it was really, I would say, satisfying on a lot of levels to be able to go one step deeper and really immerse myself in a story like that, not having to worry about videos or deadlines or put it out. Writing a book is the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't know how you've done it. I don't think I'll ever do it again, but it was such an honor to be able to tell her story and to be able to have this amazing girl like open up to me and bare parts of her soul to me, and also to really contextualize the Palestinian story for an American audience that I hope reads it and is able to understand what it means to grow up under a military occupation, under apartheid, in a way I think that hasn't been achieved yet in the United States. That's the hope with this story, which is out September 6th. You could pre-order it now. They called me a lioness.
The plugin is acceptable. You're doing, you're speaking truth to power.
Just announced it. So
yeah, no, that's great. So actually, Dena, I want to ask you, like, how much time can you spare? You can be like very honest. He's like, I need to leave now, or I've got like a few more minutes.
No, I could do 10 minutes or so.
You can do 10 minutes? Okay. Yeah. So I have the tendency to monopolize conversations. I would have opened things up for Sherine, but she had to leave because of the time difference. But we have an audience here, and I'm curious if some of them might have questions. Does anybody have any questions for Dena? I'm putting you all on the spot. Yes? Okay, in the back. I'm going to relay them if you, or. Yeah. Dena, the question is about Canada-Israel relations, what that means to you, and Canadian recruits to Israel, joining the IDF and being part and parcel of that sort of war machine, or Canada's policies in general. I don't know how closely you follow Canada.
No, unfortunately, I don't follow Canada too closely.
We're not
My
that way.
reference point being the United States, the US, maybe I'm sorry, I don't really know much about that. Maybe you can.
We don't really throw our weight around, but it's Canada is kind of a lesser problem. But I would sort of relay that by saying I would strongly encourage you to look at Canada, because we are, kind of a complicated dynamic, and we have a long history of supporting Israel publicly, even when our so-called kind of liberal prime minister gets really great scores on so many different things. One of the first things that he supported was an anti-BDS resolution in our house upon ascending to the prime minister's position. So that was like one of the first things that he did. So that's something worth noting. All the way in the very back. Okay. Okay, you're gonna like this one. This is Parsa, right? On the back, I can't see you very well. Is that Parsa? So Parsa from the caucus, really awesome progressive work being done here locally. This is a question about your recent work covering Indigenous communities in Hawaii. How much of, and of course, obviously some of us have had a chance to watch it, and it's really stellar work. The question is about how much of the coverage or the way that you approached it is informed by your Palestinian identity and notions of indigeneity and settler colonialism?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is actually. I've said this before, that when I've reported on Indigenous issues, whether it's, the Dakota Access Pipeline at Standing Rock or Hawaii, this is my second visit, there's almost an automatic trust there on behalf of the communities that I'm interviewing, where they're like, oh, you're Palestinian, you get it. We trust you, because I understand, I have a lived experience of what it means to be from a people, from a land, a community that's actively undergoing settler colonialism, that are victims of settler colonialism, what it means to be stateless, what it means to, to be militarized, to have a painful relationship with your homeland. And so, being also a US citizen and knowing this country's history and how it has dispossessed and massacred and continue to oppress Indigenous communities, that's definitely something very close to my heart. And it definitely inspires the stories like the ones we did in Hawaii. Hawaii was a sovereign nation. Their queen was illegally overthrown by the United States. And then Hawaii was annexed as a territory and then became a state. For years, they actively quashed the Indigenous culture. They banned the language in the schools. There has been a resurgence and a revival since, but the Hawaiian people have a very, very painful history. And the United States is wholly responsible to that. And on top of that, there's a lot of militarization in the state of Hawaii. And that's what our series looked at, the role of the US military there.
Thank you, Dena. Over here. Yes. What? Yeah. It's a question about when you can come to Canada to promote your new book. So
yeah, I know, I'll talk to One World about that. So everything will happen after it comes out. And my goal, my dream is that Ahed's able to travel, that she gets a visa to come to the United States and she gets a visa to come to Canada, because this is her story first and foremost. So hopefully things will be more clear soon, but September 6th and beyond, inshallah, is when everything will be happening.
Inshallah. Is there a documentary? There's an audio. You're turning it into an audiobook as well, or there is an?
Yeah, we will do an audiobook, and
I think there's some short films about Ahed as well that can.
Oh yeah, I mean, we produced one. If you look up AJ Plus direct from and like Nebi Saleh or my name or her name, you can see the 2-part documentary we did in 2018 about Nebi Saleh, which culminated with my interview. It ended with my interview with her. But yeah, there's a lot of documentaries out there about their village.
Okay. over here. A big fan, first and foremost, disclaimer. Mhm. Okay. Mhm. Okay. Terrific. That's a great question. Thank you. So the question is about, obviously you're gearing a lot of your work for audiences that may not be familiar or are not necessarily engaged in the conflict directly, and that's why these explainers are what they are. The question is about what are your hopes of, doing this work? Like, what are the consequences? What do you expect people to do? Obviously, there's the voting certain people into or out of office, depending on their position vis-a-vis Palestine. But in terms of, the kinds of things that you want to see happen, where do you see things going? What are the action sort of points that people should take away?
I think the action points are for the people to answer. I think our job is to inform and to educate and to equip you with the knowledge and with the vocabulary and the tools to then, go off, and whether it's, lobby, or I don't know, you guys don't have congressmen or whatever, but, to pressure your elected officials to see it, to make a change, to, it's not my job to endorse the BDS movement, but if that's a route that somebody wants to take based on the information or the knowledge that they learn from our reporting, then like, so be it. I will say that, I've been with AJ Plus since I joined late 2013 before we launched, and we started putting out videos about Palestine in 2014. And when nobody else was saying things like apartheid and illegal occupation and illegal Israeli settlements, we were saying that, and we doubled down on that, and our videos went viral. And now, at least in the United States context, some of those terms have even gone mainstream. You see progressive members of the US Congress, known as the Squad, saying apartheid and saying illegal Israeli settlements and stuff. And so for us, we take pride that we were, Sherine said they've been working on it for 7-8 years, so I don't want to take credit for that. But
it ended up in the report. That's all good.
Exactly.
Like synergy,
These things that were, more taboo to say or not as mainstream have now become widely embraced. And I think we played a small part in that, and that is impact.
Fantastic. We have time for one more question. Yes, right there. You want to tell me the second part as well, and I'll loop them in? Okay. So two-parter, very good, very excellent question on both levels. The first is in your documentary filmmaking and your reporting, and obviously you're cognizant of your perspective, but also the perspective of your subjects. How do you sort of find that balance between those two, like telling your story or what you see to be the priority or the important thing that needs to be relayed, and the story of your subject? Obviously with this book, you're doing exactly that. You're telling someone else's story, but then you're also kind of embroiled in it. So that's the first question. The second question is about, persons of Swana background, if you're BIPOC background, individuals from our region writ large, what does it mean for us to be telling our own story, and what does it mean to relay that story in such a way that it becomes either palatable, comprehensible, and perhaps worthy of solidarity on the part of others?
Yeah, so for the first question, it is like our editorial principle is to always tell the story from the perspective of the oppressed, right? So that's first and foremost. Like, I'm not trying to go in with my opinions or my whatever. I'm trying to understand, let's just use the instance of Hawaii. I'm sitting across from these native Hawaiian activists who are saying the US military needs to get out. They need to stop bombing and desecrating our land. That's sort of like Al Jazeera, when they launched, they said, we're not filming from where the rockets are fired. We're going to go from where they land. And so that's sort of the editorial value, the editorial principle, that we have. So I think I'm always mindful of that and really trying to have a level of empathy and understanding from the people who are whose lives are at stake or are victims of a story. And then there's the other component where we go to the other stakeholders, like the people who are in charge, whether it's the US military or Donald Trump or whatever, and to channel everything they've told me and be their voice and unleash the fire, And by the fire, I just mean like tough questionings and holding them to account. So that's sort of always my MO. Compassion and empathy with the people that I'm interviewing who are affected, and then just like strict, like fearless accountability with those who are the perpetrators. And the second question is, what does it mean for us to tell our own stories?
And rendering them sort of palatable or comprehensible. Am I capturing that correctly? For global North audiences, how do we get, those who are not necessarily experiencing our lives and our livelihoods in such a way that they can be at least somewhat sympathetic, if not empathetic, and in solidarity?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important to be authentic to your experience and to your identity, and to not try to actually filter it for a Western audience, and to be, like, if I just use the example of this book, I'm really appreciative of our publisher, One World, because at no point were they like, hey, this might not go over too well with the Zionist audience. Like, we were 100% unapologetically telling the story of Palestine and of the occupation from a Palestinian vantage point, and from, calling things as they are. And that's what gives the story, I think, power and resonance. And so, I don't know, like, you want to be, I guess, mindful of what people don't know and provide that necessary context, but don't water yourself down. Don't try to make yourself white or not whatever you are. You know what I mean? Embrace and really step into that and own, like, there's an authenticity there that we should own as people of color, as people from marginalized communities, and to be unapologetic about those stories and who we are. I hope that answers that. I don't know. I feel like I'm maybe missing part of the question, but.
Thank you. It really does. Dena, we really appreciate your time and your candidness. Thank you for doing what you do. You are not only telling the stories of Palestinians with authenticity and accuracy, as you said, but you're also inadvertently doing Palestinians a remarkable favor. And I think your parents should be immensely proud. I, as a former professor, now that you've outed me, I'm very proud. But your parents should be very proud of how incredible this journey has been, and yeah. So well done. Thank you, Dena. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's just like I'm kind of excited, and I think I'm also hungry. It's like hypoglycemia. Thank you, Dena.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you for attending and having me.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon in person with your book in hand.
Inshallah. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
And you guys are the next generation. So our hope is in you. You're going to make us proud. Like, you guys, I'm assuming a lot of you are Gen Z, like, you guys are it. So I'm so excited to see what everyone in this room ends up doing. And like what my generation did is whatever, but you guys really you're something else. So don't forget that.
Thank you. Yeah. Resounding round of applause from all 1,500 people. Thank you.
Right. It doubled, huh? Yalla.
No, exactly. Take care, Dena. Thank you so much. That was, I don't know why I'm laughing. It's like, we're just being silly. Okay, folks, we're going to take very, very short 15-minute break. Go outside, grab yourself some food, nibble, and then come back. We have an incredible film and conversation with Sobhi Al-Zobaidi, who is with us here today. We're going to screen his incredible film and have a conversation. He is an absolutely remarkable filmmaker with a tremendous legacy. So don't be late. Go outside, nibble, and come right back. But don't bring the food here. Hi, folks. Come on in. Make yourselves comfortable. We're in a race against time. Okay, people outside can't hear me, so that doesn't do anybody any good. Yeah, do you mind just like, rallying people? That's my rallying people voice. Okay, so we have to be out of here by 9 o'clock, which I think is a fairly reasonable thing to do. Okay. Okay, so the last part of today's program is one that I'm immensely excited about. We will be screening Sobhi Al-Zobaidi's film, My Very Private Map, a film that you will discover very quickly is very much in the spirit of a Nakba and what it means to be losing land, life, memory, and so many other things. Sobhi Al-Zobaidi's first and as the title suggests, is a very personal film. It was made in memory of the foundation of the State of Israel, an event with a heritage that weighed heavily on the life of Palestinian refugee camps. Following in the tracks of a map of the title, fragments are brought together by fragile, precise links, an old ceramic pot, a fading letter. Slow motion historic black and white pictures are accompanied by spiritual songs by American indigenous communities. In interviews, the Intifada is defended and the speakers do not shirk from confronting the narrator with their frank opinions, but sitting with a few stoic old men, the narrator is brought back down to earth. A Very Private Map is a lyrical ode to Palestine, not a film that puts tears in your eyes, but one that reminds you of your ability to cry. Sobhi Al-Zobaidi is an independent Palestinian filmmaker, artist, and scholar. He studied economics at Birzeit University and cinema at NYU. He made a number of award-winning documentaries, short fiction, art videos, and multimedia installations. He studied film production and cinema studies at NYU, and since 1998, he has been an active member of the new and independent film movement in occupied Palestine. He taught film and media at Birzeit and Al-Quds universities, published reviews in both English and Arabic of Palestinian cinema, art, and politics. Since the year 2000, he worked as a writer for the Swiss weekly WOZ, W-O-Z, sorry, I don't know what the American thing, writing on Palestinian culture and politics. Currently, he's working on a doctoral research on issues relating to dispossession and memory. Thank you so much for the work that you've done and continue to do. You are part of the legacy of telling stories about Palestine and Palestinians. Thank you for sharing your work and look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you.
I will be brief. I haven't seen this film in a few years, and it's like, I just remember one of the things I wanna like mention. I made this film. You see, there are lots of black and white footage, archival footage. It's interesting. And I finished my studies in New York in 1994, and I went to Palestine. 1994 was Oslo, Arafat, and the Palestinian Authority came to Gaza. In 1996, 1997, now the UNRWA archive, UNRWA started producing films and photography about Palestinian refugees since 1951, 3 years after 1948. The only institution in the world that documented Palestinian refugees is UNRWA. They used to send film crews, as you saw, and photographers and etc. All this archive was kept by UNRWA in Geneva. After the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, there were talks and they decided to move to the archive to Gaza. In 1997, they moved the archive to Gaza, and I was probably the first Palestinian filmmaker to raid the archive. I had some connections there in Gaza, so I went and they took me to this room with huge, like, so many like tapes, and it was like finding a treasure. All these films and pictures were made by non-Palestinians, by, Westerners. And it was like finding something you lost and you want to claim it all over again. So not only me, but I started it. So I used this footage that was taken by other people to represent us. If you see the films, like I've seen the films and I wrote about these films in my writings, they usually represent or show Palestinians as refugees. They never tell you they are refugees, the outcome of a colonial settler project that's by Israel. And it seems like you would think it's a natural disaster or something. These poor refugees, they are nice people, just help them, and etc., etc. My first intuition was, I want to insert my voice in the story. I want to retell, I want to re-narrate those footage and those pictures of Palestinian refugees. Those are my mother and my father and my grandparents and everybody I know. So part of the incentive, really, the push to make this film in 1998 was the finding of the Palestinian archive in Gaza, and also the heaviness of the movement of the Israeli 50th. They made a huge celebration in Israel for the 50th anniversary of the founding of Israel. And it's like somebody celebrating raping you in front of your face. Somebody raped you and they are bragging about raping you. That's how I felt, and that's how I still feel. And that's like my way of saying, telling the story otherwise. That's my way of telling that, no, this is not your land. You raped us, you raped the land, you took it. We were here, and we will, you know, the rest of the story. So that's just the context in which I want to tell you, share with you, shut me up when you need to, just tell me to get out of here and I will run to the you remember there is a poet. This poet, he's a Palestinian refugee, and he was living in Jordan. After the Palestinian Authority came, many Palestinians were able to come, especially those connected to the authority. Muhammad al-Qaisi was connected to the authority. He's a beautiful poet, but you know, he was connected, and he was able to come to Palestine. When he came, he stayed with me in my house. I was a single man living in Ramallah, artist, filmmaker, and I had a big house. So he came through friends, and he stayed with me in my house. And we were like, every night we drink tea or whatever, and we write poetry. And I discovered that also from the same camp, the man, they were friends. So I arranged for that meeting between them after 32 years or whatever, and everything went well. The film was made. I screened the film. Muhammad al-Qaisi, the poet, went back to Jordan. The first screening on the film, it was in Ramallah, a popular arts center, I remember. And Salim Tamari, he's a professor of sociology. He's a Palestinian. He was among the audience. After the film finished, he tells me, can you please rewind the film to the image of there is a young woman who appears like in black and white. She's beautiful, and there is a gun. You see, she's crossing the bridge. And we see her twice. And I say, yeah. We rewind the tape, and he's like, everybody from Ramallah. And they look at each other, the older men, and they say, this is Jinan Harb. Jinan Harb, I know who Jinan, I heard of her. She is the daughter of one of the owners of a hotels in Ramallah. They left Palestine in 1967. She ended up in Saudi Arabia, married to King Fahd. Then she actually divorced him, or he divorced her. She lives in London, and etc., etc. However, that's not the story. The story is the poet Muhammad al-Qaisi was working in their hotel, and he was in love with this woman without her knowing, and who used to write her letters every morning. He took a tray of hummus and fool or whatever, and he went, because he worked in the hotel, he went to the house to give her a breakfast. With the tray, he wrote poems and put them under the plates or under the bread or whatever. It just loved poems. She never responded, of course. He was like a poor boy from the refugee camp, and she was like from one of the richest families in Ramallah. But I couldn't believe myself. I didn't know. When I put the poem, his voice over her image, over her walking, emerging. And that's a moment really, every time I think about it. And now when I saw the film, I remember just like how our memories, it's not just about talking, it's memory, and our memories embedded as indigenous native people in our land. It's not only our land, but our stories will never disappear because they are organic. Even by chance, by luck, by design, by whatever you wanted, our stories will unfold, will be told. And this brings me to just a few more minutes to circle back to this event here at SFU. And by it's so important what happened in the last 3 days. And this what the Simon Fraser Student Society have achieved is something remarkable, something that I have all along believed that we Palestinians are, because we are a diasporic nation, we are multilingual, multicultural. We possess so many, as a diasporic nation, so many forces. We are forceful, but our forces are not yet articulated as power. But one day they will. And the only way that our forces will re-emerge, will be re-articulated as power, is that by little, location by location, event by event, that we force our voice, we force our story, that we manage to emerge from invisibility to visibility, from being silenced. Every time we say the word Palestine, they call us anti-Semite, to our ability to say, no, we are Palestinians and we're not anti-Semites, we're anti-colonialists, we're anti-oppressors. The event that happened, the achievements of the Simon Fraser Society is a step towards that goal. And one last thing, also about this, that I lived all my life in Palestine, up until like 15 years ago when I left, I came to Canada. I still go back to Palestine. I didn't really leave because my thoughts and my heart and my work all about Palestine still, but we are Palestinians now are 14 million, of which about 6 million live in Palestine, about 1.75 million in Gaza, 3.1 million in the West Bank, 1.75 million Palestinians live in Israel, about 6.5 million Palestinians live in neighboring Arab countries, and about 1.2 million live in the diaspora in other countries in Latin America, North America, and Europe. If you take every Palestinian community, we are dispersed, we are disconnected. The Palestinians in Gaza, you know Gaza, they cannot connect with anybody. They're like ruled by Hamas. Palestinians in the West Bank, ruled by the Palestinian Authority. Palestinian Authority has no connection, no relation with Hamas. Palestinians living in Israel, they are Israeli citizens. Anytime something happens, if it is like political, they always threaten to be thrown out. Palestinians in Jordan, they carry Jordanian passports. Palestinians in Syria, they carry Syrian travel documents. We're dispersed by, just like in any way you want, fragmented and dispersed. But this fragmentation and dispersion are forces that once we, by events like this, we re-emerge, we connect the dots, and we turn our forces into power, political, economic, cultural power that will help us go where we want to get. I think I should stop here, right? It's about I'll just leave, unless there is a question, I'll answer one question or no? One question, maybe, if there is any question. Yeah, go ahead. The two friends that they met after 22 years? Yeah, sorry, what's the question again? About me? Oh, it was heartbreaking, honestly, but they were like also the other guy, the one with there is the poet and the other guy writes poetry. This is why they're two like good friends, you know. It was really like a fantastic moment for me to see them together. They took, and I saw their letters, and this is just a few minutes. We filmed about 2 hours of their meeting, but it was very emotional every time. Until now, I see the film and I get like almost wet eyes when I see them. The poet, he passed away 5 years ago in Amman, Jordan. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming and for supporting this event. And one last thing, I really want to thank Adil and the Center for Islamic Comparative Studies. I messed it up, I know, but I mean, this is really remarkable. The event is energizing to see 3 days celebrating Palestine without us having not to worry about what we talk, how we talk. That's an achievement by itself here in Canada, and I hope that it continues to grow all over Canada and all over North America. Thank you, Adel, and thanks to everybody who's involved in this event. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Sobhi, and I'm so sorry that we're so limited by time. Just really quickly, I know that we've mentioned the names before. Everybody responsible for making this happen. It's been really terrific. We're very, very honored. And I just want to say in response to, or in addition to what Sobhi said, there's a tendency for us to restrict our own actions, our own expressions for fear of consequences. I want you to know that even though this event is probably the largest event or 3-day event on Palestine, as far as I can recall in SFU's history, there's been absolutely no backlash. There's been no negative response. I mean, we are here, we're saying whatever we want to say. And the only consequences are for people to be enlightened, to be advocated to, and to understand the situation better. So don't restrict yourself for fear of what might happen. Take the plunge. There are others doing so courageously here in Palestine, across the Palestine that's been bifurcated and divided. So thank you for everything that you've done. It also is an opportunity for me to thank the unsung hero. The young woman in the back there is Amal Abdullah. She refuses to take credit. Can you please stand up? You're going to stand up. I will use whatever power I possess. Please. Okay, so that's Amal. Go up to her, thank her. She's the reason why this exists. And SFSS, SJP, the caucus, all the folks who are working hard, and doing remarkable work day in, day out to make this possible. I'm humbled to be in your presence. So one last thing we're going to do right now, we have about 9 minutes in this space and we have to evacuate it. We are immense. I know that we've been dealing with very, very, very heavy content today. And for a lot of people, this is very intense, not the least of which is Sobhi, who we rehashed all of these memories, both the good, the bad, and the ugly during this time. But it is also an opportunity for us to find that inner peace. And we're lucky to have with us Quantum Care. They are here to support us through the journey of mindfulness and becoming centered with ourselves. So we have the space for about 8 minutes. They're going to lead us in an exercise to become centered. You're welcome to leave if you have to, but I would strongly encourage you to participate. It doesn't take much and you will be uplifted by it. Thank you.
Testing. Yes. Hello, everyone. Yes, we have very limited time. And as Quantum Care, my name is Eda. And so I'm from Turkey, she's from Syria, and we are bringing our ancient knowledge as well as our knowledge that we gain here with traditional Chinese medicine, neuroscience, and blending all in just to help us breathe a little deeper. I feel like all this, yes, inspirational stories and beautiful movies, also a lot of hardship. So our nervous system is responding as fight or flight. We are reactive and we are breathing from here, not a holistic breathing. So we just want to invite you. Of course, it's up to you. You don't need to move if this is not serving, but just to feel your feet on the ground. And just take a deep breath in. And exhale it all out. Inhale that cleansing life into your tummy, into your chest. And then exhale, soften your shoulders. That tension really stores around our shoulders, our lower back. So keep inhaling. And as previous gentleman said so beautifully, we all have our own powers, and we can only cultivate it if we take care of this body, this mind, this heart and soul. Then we can actually, strengthen all parts of our lives. So just bring your chin towards the chest and allow your head to get nice and heavy. And keep breathing and bring the head and make circles, nice and slow circles. And as your head goes towards the back, just gently bring it to the other side. You don't need to bring it all the way to the back, but just stretch and feel if there is any tension. I say that taking care of ourselves is one of the most radical self-love and self-compassion. And as Palestinians all around the world and in Palestine, being healthy and being able to live this life in your own powers is important. So next time your chin comes towards the chest, let's make your circle the opposite way, maybe just the 3 circles. And next time you make a circle, just as your chin comes towards the chest, you can bring your head to a neutral position, aware of the time. So we are just going to do a Sufi grind. You can kind of sit a little bit closer to the edge of your seat and just gently move your spine. Give some love to that low back that we've been sitting, and allow your spine to move and bring that oxygen in, and then breathe in, and then the opposite way. If you can breathe a little deeper and if you soften a little bit more, then we are going to leave this lighter. And then just stand up if you can. And just shake those shoulders downward, like maybe tensed up. Maybe just make circles, open your wings, open your arms, and take space, and be yourself, and open your hearts, and then you can come to the opposite way. Yeah, it can be gentle, it can be, do your own stretch. And let's kind of a little bit of Qigong, but bringing that light, bringing that energy. So if you can just bring your hands down as if you are pulling that grounding earth energy up through our spine. And then towards the sky, to the heavens, and then sharing with all our siblings of Palestinians all around the world. Share, we are so powerful and so connected, and then pull that earth energy. And then as you exhale with a gentle smile and hope, and knowing that we are doing what is just. We are standing up for justice. And then one more time, inhale. Share your light, share your gifts. And just check in with yourself. Maybe bring your hands to your hips and just move a little bit. Yes. Yeah, and we can wrap up. Yes, hope you are feeling a little bit lighter and hopefully you can breathe more. So thank you so much for joining us. Yes. Thank you. Beautiful evening.
Thank you so much, Ida. Thank you so much, Massa, Quantum Care. They're always here to help us, remind us of how we need to care for ourselves to be able to care for others. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again at every event.
Yes.
Good luck, everyone. Be kind to yourself and others. Thank you for your support. Thank you for being here. I know it's been a long program. We appreciate it. Just all I can say is continue to do your part. And thank you. Have a wonderful one and have a fantastic weekend and take care. Thank you.